And so with that, Sophie and I are going to have a conversation as it were. And we hope to get your questions. And we are very much looking forward to having this conversation with you all joining today. So thank you very much for doing so.
Super. Let's go to the next slide, please. We will give you now with Sean, together with Sean, just a brief overview, essentially of what we've been up to since the last office hours, and perhaps provide some topics or ideas to inspire some questions after this around 10-minute segment. So I'm a curator of film, for those of you who don't know, and I have this image on screen of a film I wanted to talk about and speak a little bit also about what a program has been. Just to give a brief description of the image, it is a still from the film In the Same Breath by Nanfu Wang, a feature film from this year. In it, you see a grid of people with masks and Chinese flags, and it's kind of ceremonial and very actually visually interesting, very formal arrangement of folks on screen. And this image was the opening night of our, actually the 20th edition of our documentary film festival called Doc Fortnight, which took place but month and a half ago on MoMA's virtual cinema. And I actually would love to give a plug for any MoMA members who are here or anyone interested in becoming a MoMA member, that virtual cinema programs and screenings are free, and we're rolling out new screenings and new offerings online. And that actually will continue whenever our cinemas reopen again, which we hope is very soon. So the Nanfu Wang film is really a look back at the year 2020 and is both an investigative but also a very personal take on the pandemic as it unfolded both in Wang's native China and then here in the US, where she lives in New Jersey, just outside of New York City. And the reason I'm bringing it to you now is that what it really inspired for me is to think about timelines, actually, which is maybe a word that we think about a lot, or maybe we scroll, scrolling on our timelines on our phone. But to think that what the Nanfu Wang film does is really, first of all, it looks back at the outbreak of the pandemic in Wuhan and really has kind of never seen before footage in the hospitals and in the city there. But she films from the beginning of 2020, the first day, and then to New Year's Day 2021. And what she ultimately, I think, asks us is, when does this end? What does it mean for the pandemic to be over? And she also definitely looks at the kind of political and social and information-driven factors that precipitated and really were the driver of the spread of the virus. What else had to spread, or what else had to be at work for the virus to spread? So that's information, social media, politics, images, and she really leaves us with the sense that long after long after our cities or our societies will have reopen, whatever this means, after we have had our vaccines, whenever this is, and thinking of the different timelines of access to that, what will still be here, and what will be those pandemics that we'll still have to deal with in our social and political fabrics. So I've thought a lot about this as we talk about the city going back to normal in New York City. We talk about our cinemas coming back. Don't get me wrong, I can't wait for that. But what are the ideas and what are the questions that we have to keep really front of mind in terms of how we relate to each other, and how between nations, within societies, between citizens and governments, but within the arts, right? Artists and institutions, all of these sets of relations. So I'll say my manifesto is, I don't want to go back to normal. I want to be somewhere else. I don't know what it is. And that's why the course is a question, because we get to ask questions and hope for answers. So on to Sean, but this is what I've been thinking of. This is what I've been up to, programming online for film, And it's been amazing to connect with viewers from around the country, around the world through that program as well. I've been thinking about how I don't automatically prioritize the physical campus of the museum, although it is a central part of my work.
Mm.
It's not the only place, and that's new, and that will continue, and that's how we get to engage with all of you. So, okay, Sean, on to you.
Well, I mean, I have a question, Sophie. Did
Yes.
did Wang, did Wang make that film in the like beginning with the pandemic, or was it a project that she was
No. It was
taking along, or how did it work?
I will tell you, and I'll also say for folks who haven't seen it, it is available on HBO Max in the US. So for, again, anybody in the US who might want to see it. No, the way that the film happened, again, it's very personal. Wayne's parents live about 100 kilometers from Wuhan, and when she was at the beginning of 2020, this is for those of you maybe also in film, this is a crazy story. Uh, she brought her 3-year-old son to her mother's home, to her parents' home in Wuhan, so that he could be with them for the Chinese New Year while she was at the Sundance Film Festival in January, where I was as well. And while she was at work at the festival, the first news and the first sentiment that there was something seriously wrong, a health crisis was happening, started to reach her on her phone, both in the kind of forums and also starting in the news. And she essentially took the first flight she could back to China to go collect her family, her son, and started actually then realizing that there was such a massive discrepancy between what was being reported on the Chinese news, what she was seeing in these online forums, that she felt that she had to capture it in real time. And that's how it starts. It's a very, very, very personal thing. And she actually, the way it actually began is she started taking screen captures of pleas for help, actually, both information sharing, but pleas for help from individuals who were not able to get to enter the hospitals in Wuhan because there was a sense and that to allow folks to get treatment was to show numbers, right? And those posts were being taken down as soon as they were being posted. So she started making a social media archive, and that actually appears in the film. So anyway, we should go on to reconstructions, but it is something that starts from very personal place, and it also is really dealing with the different kinds of imagery. Like what is the record of this last year, and I would say of this present. And one final thing, a very touching and very, very arresting aspect of the film is she uses so many of these images that were on the forums, which are X-rays. The X-rays of lungs that were being taken down. And she said, I've collected all these, I actually had goosebumps just saying that. All these X-rays that by the time she collected them as an archive were of folks who had passed away. So I encourage you all to seek it out, this wonderful film. And it was a real honor to launch it through the museum. And yeah, I mean, Nanfu asks, there is another pandemic, one of politics and misinformation and nationalism that's still with us, and let's not lose sight of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you and I had talked about thinking through what it means to be now, in the now, and watching things transpire from the relative security of our apartments in New York, which is undergoing, a reopening, if you will, in many, many ways, whilst so many other people, so many other nations in the world are falling victim to the pandemic of politics. And, it's heartbreaking, it's traumatic, it is without words when we start to observe these things and think about them. I mean, I could go on and just think about India because I've lived there and I spent so much time there and I have many friends there and so forth. But rather than dwelling in that, I would say that what we do see in films like this and in the museum, and the possibility of having a virtual cinema, which is extraordinary, is the ways are the ways in which art can at least on one hand address these questions, these crises, these multiple crises, and also offer a degree of refuge or solace in the midst of crises and politics and so forth. So I think we could go on to the next image, please. Thank you. You know, you talk about time and temporality. It's something that we've brought up many times in our previous office hours for this course. And I had the great honor and privilege to open an exhibition at the end of February of this year entitled Reconstructions, Architecture and Blackness in America. And it soon will end, unfortunately. Very, very brief run. And this is an exhibition that my now mentor, friend, colleague, all like mother goddess, co-curator Mabel Wilson, and then with Ariel Dion Krosnick and Anna Burkhart. We worked together for almost 4 years. We found the first email of being in early 2017 when Mabel and I started having a conversation about what it would mean to make an exhibition that had never happened before in any shape or form at the Museum of Modern Art. You know, so on this topic, on this question of who makes architecture and for whom is architecture. So just a little bit of background. It is the very first time in more than 90 years that the Museum of Modern Art has shown the work of Black architects, artists, and designers, period. The first work of a Black architect, African-American architect in our museum collection was only in 2018 in the work by Amanda Williams. So what does this mean historically to fashion an exhibition around fundamental questions of who we are as a society, and how do we design and how do we think of the built environment as not only a reflection, but also an extension of the systems and structures that for so long divide us. And they continue to divide us rather than putting us back together again in any kind of productive way. So it's been an extraordinary ride in such, we made this exhibition fundamentally on Zoom. These works are all commissioned. There are 11 of them. And this is just one view of the gallery. I didn't want to share too much because all of you joining us could go online and look at it. But also the fact that the not only the national, but the global response to the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and of course, many, many more, occurred in the midst of our making this exhibition.
Sean, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
For those who don't know, but also for me, even I have to know, what is a commission? And also, what does that do for the exhibition? Like what did that allow you to do that's different than going to an architect studio or having a meeting with an artist and saying, okay, we want this piece. What do you think about this? Like, what does commissioning do for a show like this?
It's a fantastic way of thinking about this. A commission means that, well, I won't go into the technical part. What I would say is that it was essential for us to assemble a group of people whose work could speak backwards and forwards simultaneously. because and this is where I was getting to the idea of temporality. We imagined that this exhibition had to be across the United States. So there are 10 cities. But we also recognized from the beginning that in order to make an exhibition like this, we had to throw out any kind of convention of an architectural convention of saying, you have a site or a typology, now go be an architect and think about that. But rather we took that away and we created the terms through and by which each participant would reflect upon and then build their own research and their own ideas and their own questions about those 10 cities. So the commission is on one hand a prompt, a kind of conceptual prompt, with a due date at the end, as it were. And in fact, our exhibition was to open in October of last year, but because of the pandemic got pushed. But also the role of the commission, meaning that each of the works that are in this exhibition are wholly new. They were made for the exhibition. So they speak to also this trajectory and this arc of time that we're reflecting on right now. I think each of the works in and of themselves show in their transformation over time the ways in which our conversations with each participant and the group and the events that were happening outside in the world transformed not only their shape, their form, but also their meaning. And so when I go into the gallery every time, I not only see something new, but I reflect upon what each of these works begins to signal or signify for me as a citizen, and also for potentially for an institution to now have this on display or have this exhibition on display.
Yeah, and just another timeline thought is that now this is it all. I mean, this I have to say, I try to anything that I do at the museum, I try once it's done to think of it as not the end of a conversation, but the beginning of one. So you and I both work with the collection a great deal. When I bring works into the collection, once you have the film print or the hard drive or whatever it is, once you have that on the shelf and you have the paperwork with your I's dotted and T's crossed, I think, you know, maybe conventionally or just logically, maybe, okay, well, that's done. But actually, you know, if I do things right, that actually is the beginning. And then you can really start to dig into what it would mean to show it, what it would mean to show it in ways that are unexpected. What does it mean? You know, how can we keep in touch and stay engaged? And that's true for this really monumental exhibition that you've done as well. And I just want to point also in the chat that Arla and Hannah have pointed out, of course, the dedicated and really impressive course, robust course that you've all put together.
Because of them, by the way.
And the magazine. I just want to also want to give a plug for your catalog, which I think I don't have with me, but is I don't even call it a field guide. It's a really, it's you know, some books are made, to me, some books are made for readers and some books are made for tables. I can't believe I just said that. It's true. But that book is made for readers. And I find it very, very generous and really wonderful. But all that to say, there is now an exhibition history of reconstructions, which is a starting point for something else, which we don't know what form it will take yet. But I think of that a lot at the museum, which is both, you know, has a 9 years decade exhibition history and structural history, bureaucratic history, but also lots of personal histories of curators and artists and things that were done in very different ways at different times, things that feel like they were ahead of their time, and then things that feel like maybe the tides changed and you're in a different chapter. And meaning I'm dealing with these kind of timelines. I'm thinking of where we are at the museum and where we go from here. And just to remember that every project, once it comes off the walls, has made a change in some form. So there is now this this is a bookmark, right, in the history of the architectural design department, and I can't wait to see where it leads.
That's, yeah. Let's just stop there, Sophie. That's fantastic. No, it's something to be said, like about ephemerality, about history, histories, right? Because so much of what I think all curators do, but also institutions do, is this sense of constantly building, right? We're building knowledge as a means to then share it, and to, it becomes this kind of I don't know the mathematical term, but it'd be like everything just grows exponentially, right? It just transforms, and that transformation happens at the individual scale, and potentially then can happen on a much greater scale. And
Yeah.
is that time, I love this idea of the timeline, right? Because we always also think that time is linear somehow, and or cyclical. And in the museum, I would say it's just kind of like this.
But I do think it's because since I'm a film person, our screenings are no longer one night in the theater. Our screenings are blocks of time on the internet. I think I'm tracing all this strange conceptual thinking around how long and short things are to that.
Yeah.
But as a film person and performer, working with time-based art, you have to think of what every individual screening can do, and is. And I've always loved that scale. That's the scale I work in, is one night in theaters, multiplied by x times 100, or more, and then that whole can come to mean
It's an
something else.
intimacy, right? I mean, that film always for me has been it's an intimacy. You might be able to be in a cinema in the BC era, and soon perhaps here. But it's an intimate gathering. As soon as the lights go down, you are by yourself, and you are with a narrative, an image, a sound, and you can hold on to it in a very particular way.
Yeah, and I mean it's collective too, and I think that's the thing that's been the most of a dislocation for us programming online, is just the loss of, just by virtue, of us not being in the same place, of a collective experience. And a lot of the programming that I was doing online, that I will continue to do online, is to try to find what is collectivity in a virtual format. And it's not just, my whole theory, and the thing that kind of kept me alive this winter, or not, sorry, that's dramatic, kept me going this winter, is to program film in a virtual format. I didn't want to pretend that the online cinema was the same as our theaters. I didn't want to say, okay, I would just approach it the very same way, replace, kind of just try to think of myself in the theaters. I actually wanted to treat it as a completely different gallery, a completely different space. And just this morning, I had a wonderful conversation with a Lithuanian artist who hopefully something will happen with her this fall, but she had this amazing idea for doing something online where there would be a set of a video that she had made for virtual cinema that also would come with instructions. And the instructions would be how to watch the film on your mobile phone, not in your home. So a lot of her work has to do with ecology, and from everything from decommissioned nuclear plants to the makeup of the particles in our body. It's really, really far out, wonderful practice. But she was saying, you could have a film where the instructions were, leave your house, go sit on a bench, and the score of what is happening around you is part of the film, and the amount of light or darkness that you happen to be in is part of the film. And that's the kind of stuff that really makes me just so excited about the possibility. Not every program can be like that, but the fact that there are artists who are engaging with the space who they don't want to pretend that they're in the theaters either, because they're not. So how do you make it interesting?
And also, there's a reciprocity there that's quite powerful. And it
Yeah.
reminds me, I know we don't have a slide of it, but there's a a work in the atrium by Amanda Williams right now, in the atrium of the museum by Amanda Williams, in which she has asked participants online uh, to contribute to a set of questions that she has formulated, and then creates a choreography, a score through which then participants in the atrium actually perform. So what's really fascinating, and Amanda's work is on the left-hand side of the image that you see there.
Yes, I would encourage everybody to participate from where you are in this really imaginative project. And the word, I'm glad you brought that up, Sean, because the word that I'm thinking about a lot in my work, and which I hope to keep in my work in every space, is spectatorship. Like viewership and spectatorship. I spend so much time thinking about the filmmaker, thinking about the artist, frankly, and I that will not stop. But to think of what participation looks like, what viewership looks like. That's what this past year and change has also, I think, forced us to just think more actively about. And sometimes spectatorship is maybe actually like meaning there aren't only ways to activate, there are also ways to say that actually turn off your camera if you need to, take time, turn down the volume if it's too loud. Like just to also remember that, speaking of embodiment, this term that Amanda uses so beautifully is, how in the same way that our screens are our home screens, this is my laptop, the same place where maybe I order a pair of sneakers is where I'm speaking to you, in the course, our bodies are also the same thing that are absorbing information of all different kinds, and cultural information and cultural experiences and art experiences, cinema experiences there's not a special bone for that, like it's all the same fabric. And I think a lot of us are weary or confused, or I don't know, maybe some folks are optimistic and feeling energized. I really hope that's the case. But
I
yeah.
I love this idea too, that maybe the Zoom grid becomes, I don't want to call it like an extension. I mean, it is an extension of the space or spaces in which we find ourselves. And so much of the world does not have access to, and yet there is a great deal of recentering ourselves in recognizing that we have this remarkable ability to then reach audiences like all of you joining us today, and beyond. I know that the work that Hannah and Arlette have done in our course and on our public programs around the exhibition, you have 500 people joining in this celebration almost, right? So I think we have to, I think we have to recognize where we are, and we have to be humbled by it, and yet we can also dream out of this box, right? We can, we have the capacity to do that, and that's what's so remarkable about the work that you do, and also I would say so much of the individual works in the exhibition here was really, it's bound in the ability to imagine. That imagination, however we want to construct or define imagination, begins with individuals, that expands collectivity, it expands community, and it expands societally, right? So
Yeah.
the ways in which imagination can be harnessed vis-a-vis a work of art then really shows you the capacity to not only be aware, but also to respond to the ways in which what you're talking about, right? Which is the power, the agency. Another word that we've used in this course quite a bit, the agency of the artist, or the agency of an institution even, or a community, to affect transformation, right? And at multiple scales.
Yeah, absolutely. Since you mentioned the atrium in our gallery program, maybe let's go to the next slide and we can talk a little bit about, do we have, I should ask you what the next, sorry, is there an image after that, Mike? Okay, let's go back. So I don't know if we have one in the galleries. Super, okay. Well, oh great, we're trying to get some questions as well. I just wanted to bring up a work that's just gone on view on the second floor galleries at MoMA. A really stunning and thought-provoking series by a native artist, Edgar Heap of Birds, a piece called Surviving Active Shooter Custer, which has two grids of monotypes, the type of printmaking, a very kind of saturated and bright reds on the one side and a little bit fainter and softer on the next side, each grid of about, let's see, 3 by 7 sets of prints that have text on them. And maybe let's go to the next slide, show you some details of the text. Reading some of these. Bullets are rapid, flesh is soft. Is it everyone's pain? Cities gleam foul, our bloodstream. That architecture and urban link for you, Sean. This is a work that was on view at MoMA PS1 not so long ago, and has now been added to the museum's collection and to our galleries. And it's just so interesting to me, again, thinking of the links between past and present and future, of course, that always the futurity of trying to activate a better future, is just the use of this term active shooter, which is so much kind of a buzzword, tragically in news. The artist uses that phrase to bring together and actually characterize massacres that were committed by US troops against Native Americans in the 1800s. So this is actually historical events that are being brought and messaged kind of with the same kind of language or with the same kind of container or same kind of announcement than what you might hear about in the news. It's just interesting to think of linking current and past forms of violence through text and this almost kind of abstraction of time, not knowing of what you're reading is something that happened today or happened centuries ago. And just one thing I was really interested in on a formal level, if we can go back to the previous slide, I actually was interested and wanted to talk a little bit about this work from its formal perspective, which is the monotype, which is actually a single impression, right? It's a print that's made on a plate that only has one print. It's not something that you can make many prints from. So on the left-hand side, you have the kind of primary, right, the more saturated and first impression. And on the right side, those kind of more peach-colored and orange and pink prints are made from the residual ink on the plate. And it's something that actually is not typically used in printmaking and monotypes. It's not something that is typically seen. So these sets of images that the artist talks about as a kind of ghost image. And I find that really kind of powerful, these ghost prints. He said that they recall the ghosts of a whole culture, right? These images that don't typically have value in the studio practice, and think about what kinds of stories have been valued or not valued, what kinds of peoples have been valued and not valued. So yeah, I find this work very kind of visceral and very beautiful. And for those who are in New York City, really encourage you to come and experience it in person.
And this is a work that is on the second floor in the Contemporary Collection galleries right now. And it's actually I think it's the last work that one would see when exiting that gallery or that sequence of galleries. And I think, I think this work, I think when we were talking about it, Sophie, it was that it was just recently installed within the last week, but also what we are really trying to, I think, come to terms with these days when we see um, where there's a kind of renewed recognition of not only indigenous and native practices and peoples in particular, but also perhaps we could extend that to African American and Black artists and architects and designers, of course, right? Is we in the United States, at least, had 4 years in which the suppression of any of these notions, and this is just my personal take on this, really was pushed aside. I mean, even further pushed aside than these individuals and communities have been erased from historical record and so forth. So it's really extraordinary now to talk to curators and artists of our indigenous curators and artists who, you know, have been here all along, obviously, but make, I think many of us recognize, and you use the word visceral, this is a very visceral work, like viscerally recognize our complicity in the suppression, disenfranchisement, if not erasure, of these histories and narratives. And we are complicit in them in various ways and maybe not in certain ways, but and I don't want to liken complicity with guilt because I don't think that's the construction I'm interested in, but really about how works by indigenous artists like Edgar Heap of Birds tells a parallel history, tells a parallel narrative that of violence, of land grab, of the dissolution of land and the meaning around land and ownership of narrative that for so long has been outside of the realm of the institution and even academia to a certain degree. And I think what this work does at least is kind of resuscitates that temporality that we were talking about before, but also I like that you use the word ghost as well, or does Heap of Birds use the term ghost, right? We have ghost drawings in reconstructions as well. Yolanda Daniels calls them ghost maps because she's resuscitating the ownership of land in central Los Angeles that was predominantly owned by freed Black slaves. In particular, one woman named Biddy Mason. So she retraces the urbanization of LA through Biddy Mason's ownership of land. So like values systems, ownership, property, right? But the ghosted reflection of the monotypes are exactly that. These ghosts are with us, whether we like it or not. These ghosts haunt us. And I think we as institutions, but also as people working in cultural spaces really have to have a kind of reckoning with these histories and these erasures. And I don't know what form that takes. I am not like proposing any kind of solution to it, but it does just, for me, it brings up so many questions of like where we were and where we can go, right? Where we can be. And you said at the outset of our conversation, you don't want to go back to normal. And I completely agree, because normal is what got us to this point, right? Normal got us to incredible violence across this country. Normal got us into the incredible exploitation and of people and extraction of resources without, without measure. So how do we go back to, or how do we go forward to a place uh, in which these ideas actually kind of take root?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the question. And I don't know, to also remember, I try to think about the scale or the impact or the place in which change can happen can be very grand, but it can be also very small. And actually, again, maybe I'm thinking about the Amanda Williams project again, of just rethinking what I don't know, when we talk about changing the institution or changing the field or changing the way that we relate to each other, like it doesn't mean, it doesn't necessarily mean taking everything away.
Right.
It might mean that, and there's certain folks I think who would say that's the only way, but it's like how to look at change as something that's not too big to ever be possible. That's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? To say that it's so big and it's so far and it needs to be so sudden and so absolute that it can't be in your hands and in your reach. And we were talking earlier about like how we put together exhibitions, and I just think there's lots of ways of approaching certain conversations that have already changed and that will change. And I'll just give an example, like talking about money with artists, like talking about money. Talk about money to your artists. Make sure they talk to you about money. What do they actually need to do something? Actually, talking about time on your team. Who's working every night and every weekend, like, in every field, perhaps. I don't know what our learners experience that in their own work, like just to I don't know, destigmatize things that are stigmatized and denormalize things that are normal. I don't know. I just do think that there are ways of thinking of changing the approach to our work every single day that don't preclude the need to change everything from like wholesale, right, and burn it all down, perhaps. But those things, I think, if they can happen at the same time, all the time, maybe that's how you start to see something. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where all these ideas are coming from. I'm just trying to think on this Friday afternoon, trying to figure out what we're
Friday afternoon.
what we're doing and where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about all the learners who are still with us here, but I remember reading an essay by the great essayist, thinker, Arundhati Roy, Indian thinker, activist, philosopher almost. She wrote an essay early in the pandemic last year called "The Pandemic as Portal." And what she reminded us of was that is this moment, now is this moment in which we have the capacity to look at what has come before as a means to, what you're saying is to challenge what we do next, right? On whatever scale that is necessary. And that can be political, that could be just cleaning up a sidewalk, but the ways in which we not only interact, but the ways in which we see ourselves in this world and contributing to the world, I think is something that often gets lost, that somehow we are kind of automata that go to work, we live to work, and we work to live, and we have a weekend and a holiday, and basta così, done. And I think what we're feeling these days, or at least what I'm feeling these days. And so, and a learner has written about NFTs. Yes, you've gone there. You know, NFTs are they're an economic vehicle. And I have to say, also admit that I don't know so much about it, but I do know that people are very intrigued by them. But you know, for whom do our actions benefit? If they're only for us, then we're only thinking of half the equation. And if
Yeah.
we're not, right?
No, I'd say, but there's an excellent conversation that Hannah just put in the chat between Seth Price and
Yes.
Michelle Crow.
No, we should invite her to
on NFTs. But yeah, I mean, let's see, NFTs, what the future looked like, what the future looked like in the recent past, you know, or just like how it's, yeah, I mean, art and technology has always been intertwined. And what's so interesting is how quickly the way that those things interact can change, you know, can change really quickly and can evolve, and what happens when it interfaces with really massive structures of value in terms of how information is shared, how information is controlled, how the financial industries and systems get into these kinds of artistic products. And you know, NFTs existed far beyond before artists, you know, made headlines with them. But and what does it mean that maybe the NFT moment is already over? Like how do you liken it to like it's like a stock bubble, right? But a stock bubble in the arts.
I don't want to discount the NFT yet, because I don't,
it's too late.
I don't know much about it, but
John, you had to be there. It's already.
Here we are, right?
Okay.
I mean, it is not ironic to me that the creation and kind of proliferation, there we are, proliferation potentially of the NFT at a moment when we've all mostly been online and our lives are being conducted even more so online, becomes an economic vehicle for transforming the ways in which we understand value. I think you hit the nail on the head. That value constructions are changing, and they're felt, and they are being embraced and dispersed in radically new ways.
And just to add another thread, which is in their conversation, is it's also like to own a piece of art that you can't touch, you know. I mean, that is intangible. And there are you know, historical precedents to that, you know, in the avant-garde of dematerialized art forms and ephemeral art forms, just kind of, and even actually contract-based art forms, you know, Yves Klein making contracts and ripping them up in the sand, right? Isn't that something? I don't know, I'm getting my art history right. But what happens when these avant-garde strategies actually go to like hedge funds? Like, that's the question, I think. Like, who's driving is my question. Who's driving NFTs?
Or what?
Yeah.
So Sophie, I was just told that there is an individual who has raised their hand. But and if you are interested, if you raise June Kenner. Usually I don't use names, but your hand is up. If you would like to take off your video, you can also leave it off. We don't mind. To ask your question, we'd be grateful for it.
Okay, now you can hear me.
Absolutely. Hi there.
Okay. I don't know what an NFT is.
NFT,
I have trouble with initials. I don't understand them. I wish people would use real words.
Yes,
thanks
Absolutely.
for that. And by the way, you should see the emails and meetings that we have at MoMA, because it's like alphabet soup. Actually, MoMA is the first acronym in that sentence, but
that's right.
NFT is a non-fungible token.
Even
What
that
the
makes
hell
sense.
does that mean?
Okay, let me try to get this right. A non-fungible token.
A non-what?
Non-fungible token.
What does fungible mean?
Fungible means something that can be, I believe that can be shared or can be accessed.
Yeah.
But let me.
I'll look up the definition of fungible while you.
Yes.
I've never heard the word before. Anyway.
Let me. So this was in response to a question in the chat. Let's even try to explain why we're talking about NFTs and what they are. They are, if I understood, get this right, Hannah's laughing. Okay. They are a form of digital information and a digital asset class, which have held information through online, as part of online transactions, like far before they were part of the art world. So if you have a contract, that's a PDF or an online form, how do you know that the signature in the contract is an actual signature, right? I think that to me is like the baseline of how these conversations came about. Like, what is an authentic, true, and real online signature? How can you look at a PDF or an email in your computer and say this is legally binding, right? Or this is something that I'll be able to show for my insurance or in court, or even, just to know that it's something that's real. And that's, as I understand it, how this technology was derived, something that has kind of data and security built into it, so that it is incontroversially, it is fully and always held up as the thing that it says that it is, unlike something that can be photoshopped or something that can be manipulated. It's a digital piece of information that cannot be manipulated. And what that actually has meant for the art world, when artists started using this kind of digital asset class, is that they made online imagery, an online image, that then was given value. Hannah's still laughing. I'm really trying hard. That was given value to only one person. So something that is a meme or an image that you or I, anybody can look at, only one person can own.
Yeah.
This is an economics and market and value thing. Only one person can own it. And the way they own it is a contract saying that they own it. And the way that the art world works and the art market works, and this is a whole other session as to why, and maybe how can we move away from this, is that drives collectors and that drives the market. So there was this
whole market, actually. Yeah.
A whole market. I would really encourage you to look at the essay, which explains it far better than I can. But yes, I love perfect pandemic art to add to the Zoom craze. I think we will look back at NFTs, non-fungible tokens, as a kind of, let's call it the Beanie Babies of 2020. I'm a millennial, so I can say that.
I can hear the PhD dissertations now.
Exactly. It was just not one that I will be writing, but I know we've kind of gone on a long loop about this, and maybe I didn't explain it so well, but it is true. It's like all of the ways that digital life and digital screens have changed the way we approach value. Like the fact that you and I can look at an image, but there's somebody out there who wants to own that image in a way that only they can own it, and they will pay millions of dollars for that. Okay. If they can't put it on their wall, they can't put it, they can't show it to their friends, except they can show it to their friends on their phone. The same way that my father sent all of my siblings and myself, he sent us his vaccine passport from New York State. Said, "Here's my pass." I was like, Dad.
Stuart, one of the learners wrote a very, very good, much better definition than you or I could have said about originality. And I like this idea of the real, which is both a psychoanalytic term, but also a real, like what is real, and what is owned, or who is owned, or what is owned, and so forth. and then originality, right? So much of 20th century art discourse was around the original, like, and having a semi-spiritual experience by being in contact with, Walter Benjamin calls the aura of the artwork. And so the auratic and the original are kind of bound up with each other. And given that we are in this Zoom economy where anything can be kind of remade, as it were, it's also affecting, by the way, our architecture. Architects are hopping on the NFT wagon to create spaces online that are singular and only for that one person. So it's a very, I don't know. let's talk in a year, Sophie, or
I
6
think,
months.
yeah, I do think,
No.
I do think that perspective, yeah, yes, to see how those digital moments and
Yeah.
digital forms, you know, how we can look back on them is pretty interesting. But I'm looking that we are we are out of time.
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for joining us, and to also for your questions. And please, you know, feel free to add questions to the course forum anytime. We have a section of the course called the Curator's Corner. That's where Sean and I are happy to answer your questions and engage with you there. Exactly, we'll have a new people by the next office hours. That's right. And I would just really thankful for you all for tuning in, for being part of the course, and for thinking through these very, as you can see, varied and intersecting sets of questions with us. So thanks to everyone for your time. Thanks, Sean, as always, for co-hosting with me, and thanks everybody, Hannah, Arlette, Mike, and Steve.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.
Have a good day. Take care. Stay well.